Ahala Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakakwadash, Yahweh, being the true name of the Father, as the word ignorantly calls God, Yahweh Shai, being the true name of the Son, as the word ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, along with the Holy Spirit who taught me this truth. Shalom to the hopeful elect and to the brothers that's pushing this truth in sincerity, risking life and freedom to do so. And shalom to the brothers and sisters that are listening and learning. This is your brother Labah, come to you with another lesson in truth. All right, let's get straight into it. I don't know what I'm going to entitle this lesson, but let's get straight to it. I got a lot of stuff to get to. All right, you can see right here in this picture. And let me just say this. You so-called white people have raped, robbed, and pillaged this whole earth, man. All right, now you got these millennials, as they call these so-called white people today, that don't quite get it. You know, some of you people do understand that your ancestors and your forefathers did atrocity, crime, stole land, renamed people, alligator bait, rape women, lynch, cut men, private parts off. All right, everything that you can do to a people. And you did it to the so-called Native Americans, which are our people as well, the so-called blacks and the so-called Hispanics. All right. You did this everywhere you went throughout the four corners of the earth. All right. So you can see right here. That's how you got these big companies today, like Macy's and Ross. And you look these companies up, they go back to so-called white people. And a lot of this money has been directly handed down through slavery. All right. They just got these pretty logos and these how can I say it? They got this polished, look on it now, but this is all, the oppression of the children of Israel, you so-called blacks, Hispanic, and Native Americans, and justice will be served soon. It says, look at this at the bottom. It said how slavery became the building block of the American economy. So that's how you got these big mega corporations this day that benefited off the slavery of our people. All right. So let me get into this lesson. First, let me open up with the first scripture. All right. And that's why we call you the devil. Even if our people don't quite understand, that's for us to wake them up and make them understand what's going on. The book of Job 9:24. And the prophet, my forefather was prophesying on this devil, the so-called white man. They call himself Jewish. He called himself Spanish. He called himself British. He called himself Australian. He called himself Canadian. So on and so forth, man. French. All right. It says the book of Job 9:24. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. Another way to read this, the earth is given into the control of the wicked. All right. Who is the wicked? The so-called white man. Pursuant to the book Malachi, chapter 1, verse 3 and 4. He covered the faces of the judges thereof. They go, you whitewash. All right. He whitewashed the patriarchs out of the Bible, the prophets, the Most High, the Messiah, as being so-called white men, when in actuality they were so-called black men. All right. If not, where and who is he? So his track record go tell you he the devil. He the wicked. So let's go into his track record. All right. Let's get into this. All right. And this devil gave you this. This is what's seared in our people's imagination, man. All right. This devil, Cesare Borgia, all right, is the image that you see as so-called Jesus Christ. We don't even use that name, Jesus Christ. That's a pagan name. All right. True name is Yahweh Shai, and he wasn't a so-called white man. He was a so-called black man pursuant to the book of Revelation, chapter 1, verse 13 through 15. Gives you his description for you so-called Christians. All right. And that's what they painted. And they gave this to our people. So let's go dig up some more information. All right. Let me show you this. Try to get through this pretty quickly. So this is a map, so-called map of the world. And the white man came from, as you can see at the very top, right? England, which was so-called white people, Edomites, France, Portugal, Spain. You had Rome, so on and so forth. And they came and conquered, all right, parts of Africa, all right. They came to the Americas, North, Central, and South America. That's why people speak particular language like Spanish. What the hell is they doing speaking Spanish? Well, Spanish originating in Spain. All right. They came over here, subjugated our people, North, Central, and South America, which was the 10 tribes that was in Americas. All right. That was the first slave trade with that devil Christopher Columbus, right? And then you had the transatlantic slave trade, which got the tribe of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. All right, the so-called blacks today, the so-called Haitians, the so-called Jamaicans. So let's get into this information. Let's read this. All right. It says the slave trade. It says beginning in the 16th century, the trade of African, so they even renamed you as being African. All right, that name Africa comes from Scipio Africanus, which is a so-called white man. All right, do your research. The trade of African, which would be Israelites, Hebrew Israelite slaves to the Americas became a major source of profit. All right, that's why you're seeing these mega mansions, these sprawling cities, these so-called white people driving in Lamborghinis, Maybachs, all right, with these big Fortune 500 companies, all right, and these so-called Jewish people, which are Edomites as well. All right, it says source of profit to the European merchants. European is another made-up word. All right, it's no one called Europeans. That's not a nationality, a race of people. It says this map traces the routes taken by the slave trading ships, as well as the territories and ports of call of European powers in the 17th century. All right. It says Brazil and the Caribbean to work on plantations. The first were sent from Portugal, but in 1518, a Spanish ship carried the first boatload of so-called Africans, you Hebrew Israelites, slaved directly from Africa to the Americas. Let me get into more of this information. You see? All right, let's go here. Some very interesting condemning information for you devils. All right, let's go here because they're kind of going off. Right here, when it said 500 years later, in 1492, Christopher Columbus arrived in the Caribbean, all right, Caribbean, Salakia. It said the news of this arrival must have reached the shores of the mainland rather quickly. During the second decade of the 16th century, Spanish ship, which were these so-called white people, all right, Edomites, explored the shores of the Yucatan Peninsula, resulting in the first contact with the Mayan inhabitants of that region. This cumulated the Hernan Cortez voyage in 1519, resulting in the landfall in what is now Veracruz, Mexico. Check this out right here. Pay attention to this. It says doctrine of discovery versus unceded land. It says European colonists, which, so-called white people, arriving in this part of the world proceeded to steal the land from indigenous people, which would be the Israelites that was already here. Indigenous just mean the people that was already in the lands. They like to use these words to cause confusion, so it won't sound as bad. It says indigenous people using the pretext that they had discovered a new land. How you going to discover something when there's people already staying there, man? That's robbing and stealing. It says the doctrine of discovery was used to dehumanize, exploit, and subjugate indigenous peoples and dispossesses them of their most basic rights. This resulted in policies and practices based on advocating superiority of peoples or individuals on the basis of national origin or racial, religious, ethnic, or cultural differences. That's crazy, man. Let's go right here. Let's kind of scroll down right here where it says treaties. All right. Treaties made during this period were often broken, resulting in further land grabs by settlers, which would be the so-called white man. It says, while this map pertains to the United States, similar scenarios occur throughout the hemisphere. All right. Our exhibit timeline proves more detailed information. So let me show you something, man. And this is when the so-called white man came into the Americas. And they did this in Central America. They did this in South America, as I showed you on that map. All right, they did this in Africa. They did this in Australia. They did this in so-called Canada. Everywhere these devils went. So you're looking at the very top to the left, 1784 to 1819. And you notice that the so-called white man in the white areas, right, they was already here, the lands they already previously stole. But that wasn't enough, though. We're going to watch how they, in the orange land will be the so-called Native Americans, right? The orange part and the white part will be the so-called white people. They had been stealing lands already, right? Let's go down to 1820 to 1839. Look at that map. You see how it's starting to turn white? And it's kind of funny they call themselves white people, which are they true biblical nationality are Edomites. You see how they starting to take over more land? Let's go down here, 1840 to 1859. Look at this. They're starting to take over more land. Rape, rob, kill, destroy, sick dogs on people, cut, alligator bait, all kind of stuff, man. Look at this. 1860 to 1879. Look, they started taking over the back part, California, all this. All right, you see all the white parts would be the so-called white people. All right, 1880 to 1972. Look at that. They pretty much took over the whole United States. And when they come in, they rename people. They change the name of lands. They change people identity and they bring in Christianity. All right, this new form of Christianity. And you see the present day reservation. They got our people stuck on reservations. So-called Native Americans are our people. All right, that's another thing you have to understand. All right, so let's go Salakia. I want to show you this too. And this in Peru, right, will be South America, if I'm not mistaken. It says in Peru in 1532, the emperor of the Incas was carried on a golden throne to the Camp Pizarro, the Spanish explorer, which would be the so-called white man. When the emperor refused, I want you listening to this, very important. When the emperor refused conversion to Christianity, this new form of Christianity that was spearheaded by the so-called white man, right, with these different doctrines, the doctrines of devils. It says the Spaniards began to slaughter, depicted below. So if you didn't convert to Christianity, this new modern day plantation Christianity, the so-called white man was putting out people to death. All right. They were splitting them up, putting them on reservations, putting them on different plantations. All right. Let me show you something else. That's why we call you the devil, man. Let me read this pretty quickly. It says Homestead Act. It says for 300 years, billions of dollars worth of Native American lands were granted to whites alone. You hear this? That's how they got generational wealth. That's why you at the bottom and they at the top. All right. That's how they can pull money out their ass, so to speak. Other huge blocks of land were sold to whites for only $1 per acre. Did you know this? $1 per acre. They just passed that wealth on, that land on generationally. So you see these oblivious so-called white people walking around here with blood money, so to speak, blood land. It says federal programs like the Preemption Act in 1830 and the Mineral Leasing Act in 1920 and many similar state programs, many of them, were used to confiscate land belonging to indigenous people to give exclusively to Caucasian with the so-called white man, the devil. Ultimately, the land mass of the United States came to comprise 2.4 billion acres. That's incomprehensible. The Homestead Act is probably the most rewarding affirmative action program American whites have ever given themselves. So when you say you pulled yourself up by your own bootstraps, you're a goddamn lie. Beginning in 1865, 250 million acres of land were given away to white families, many of whom were actually participated in the Southern Confederate rebellion against America. As many as 640 free acres for each white family. All right. An acre being about the size of a football field. So that's why they got generational wealth and we got generational poverty. All right. Call Hala Yahweh, Ba'ashim, Yahweh Shah, Ba'ashim, Rakak Wadash. Shalom.